Yeah. So good morning, everybody. This is the February 3rd, 2022 meeting of the Lower Downtown Design Review Commission. And I will call this meeting to order. As usual, before we begin the discussion, I will review the options for public comment. If you are joining by computer, tablet, or smartphone, you should select the hand raise option. Or if you are calling in by phone, you need to email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number and the project that you would like to discuss. So with that, we can move on to the introduction of commissioners. And I'll ask each commissioner to provide their name and position that they serve on the commission. We'll go in, excuse me, alphabetical order, but I'll start. I am Jane Chrysler. I'm the chair and preservation architect. And then next, I believe we have Mike.
I'm Mike Coughlin. I'm in the developer position.
And Andy.
Andy Duckenimke, preservation architect.
Fred.
Fred Glick, property owner.
And Jim.
Jim Gravener, resident and property owner, obviously.
And John.
McIntyre at large member.
And Heather.
Heather Vasquez Johnson, a practicing architect.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So now let's move on to the meeting record approval. So I'll ask if anyone has any comments. It looks like we have two meeting records, December 2nd and January 6th, 2022.
Hey, Jane, I have a comment. I think the January 2nd record shows that we approved the December record at that meeting. Did something change?
Question too. So, because I thought so you mean the December 2nd?
Yeah, I think that was already
got approved at the January 6th meeting.
That's what I think the record says anyway.
There was
Emily.
There was a correction on the December 2nd one with a date that I thought that we had corrected, and I don't know that that date got totally picked up in that meeting record, because it was the comment that I think that we made on the December 2nd one was for the meeting records, was for October 7th, and then there was a correction to amend it to approval for October 7th. So those were the same dates, and I thought that that was an incorrect date, but I thought that we approved it with the correction. So.
All right. Well, do you guys want to just do the January one? And Emily, unless you do you want to take a look to see what the December history is, December meeting record history is? Cool. All right. And we can always do it at the end if we have to.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. So does anyone have any comments or would like to make a motion on the January 6th, 2022 meeting record?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you, Jim, for the motion. And was that Fred that seconded?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, let's do a roll call vote and start with Mike.
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Fred?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Heather?
Aye.
And Jane is an aye. So the January 6th, 2022 meeting record is approved unanimously. Okay. So moving on, we do have two items on our consent agenda for today. They are 2022 COA 047-1432 Market Street and 2022 COA 048-1691 Market Street. So does anybody have any questions or comments regarding either of those items, or if you have an objection to them being on the consent agenda, let us know.
I want to, it doesn't affect my opinion of either of these, Jane, but just in case the applicant is on the call and listening, I do want to say that I feel like the modifications to the sign at 1691 Market Street like perfectly captured what we discussed in testimony when they were here the first time. And I think it's great. So just putting that on the record in case they're here and they're listening. So
I agree. I really thought that was a great outcome.
so if nobody has anything else, Jane, I move to approve the consent agenda items consisting of number 2022-COA-047 for 1432 Market Street and item number 2022-COA-048 at 1691 Market Street.
Thank you, Heather. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Andy. So let's do another roll call vote and start again with Mike
Aye.
and Andy,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Heather,
Aye.
and Jane is aye. And Mike, you were an aye as well. Your audio cut out a little bit.
I am an I. I'm trying to play with my mute button, and I think I'm not very expert at it.
No, I just was a tiny cutout. Just wanted to make sure.
Gotcha.
So
Thanks.
the motion passes unanimously. And yes, if anyone is on the call for either project, thank you for your effort, and you can be excused because there will be no further discussion of those items. Okay, moving along at a good clip here. So we do have one item on our design review agenda, and to remind everyone, the process for our design review, staff will make a presentation followed by questions by commissioners. The applicant will have up to 10 minutes to make a presentation to commissioners, which will be followed by any questions from commissioners. Members of the public are then welcome to comment for up to 2 minutes each. And again, if you're joining by computer, tablet, or smartphone, select the hand raise option. If you are calling in, please do send an email to landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number and project you want to discuss. At that point, staff can offer any clarifications, and following that, the commission will then go into deliberation and ultimately vote. So the first only project we have on our agenda is 2022 COA 050 1331 17th Street. So if staff would like to take it from here.
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. It's been a while since I've been here to present to any of you, so nice to see you all. So this project, the applicant is proposing to construct a new screened telecommunications facility on top of an existing rooftop appurtenance at 1331 17th Street. The site is considered non-contributing within the district, consisting of a large office tower and parking garage, which were both constructed in 1982. On the left, you can see the Google Earth image. The site, the entire site is outlined in that teal box. The office tower is at the bottom left, and the parking garage is to the upper right, marked by the red dot. So the applicant had on the right is the close-up of the parking garage, and you can see the location of the rooftop facility sort of at the top corner. On the right corner is an enclosed sort of facility room, which is below on, I think, the second from the top level of the parking garage. So we're not really going to discuss that because it's an existing enclosure and is basically interior work, which we wouldn't review. So the applicant had originally, sorry, just getting my bearings with the controls. The applicant had originally proposed to attach the new telecommunications equipment to the Market and 18th Street elevations of the existing rooftop appurtenance at the corner of the building, which is not in compliance with policy 8.2 and guideline 8.21. The applicant worked with staff to develop a scope that moved the telecommunications equipment to the roof of the existing appurtenance and screening the equipment from view. However, this scope now conflicts with several other guidelines, which we'll go over. So the existing appurtenance does not comply with guideline 4.15 as 4.1.5 as far as the minimum setback of 15 feet. However, staff found that it might be reasonable to grant an exception to this since the scope is only an expansion of an existing appurtenance rather than construction of a new one. This would, of course, also mean that the new telecommunications equipment would not meet the placement requirements for guideline 8.2.1. Again, staff found that an exception to this could be appropriate if the equipment were properly screened on top of that appurtenance. The applicant did agree to minimize the added height of the existing appurtenance so that the overall height would be 15 feet above the adjacent parapet wall so as to comply with the height requirements of guideline 4.1.5 and 8.2.2. So here you can see the added height indicated on the two elevations. So that height above the top of the adjacent parapet wall is 15 feet, which is the limit set in the guidelines. So while staff found that the revised placement and height as presented in this application package could be appropriate if screened in compliance with the guidelines, we also found that the proposed FRP material is not an appropriate screening material per guideline 6.2.1. As the existing appurtenance sits in line with Market and the Market and 18th Street facades, the walls facing those two streets are extensions of these two highly visible street facades. According to the guidelines, street facades should be constructed of traditional masonry, and the proposed FRP is not a traditional masonry material. The applicant has provided information that a traditional masonry material is not feasible for screening as it would interfere with the telecommunications equipment. Staff have found that they cannot recommend approval of the FRP screening material given the guidelines, but the commission may choose to approve the project if it finds that it still meets the spirit of the guidelines as far as rooftop appurtenances, materials, and telecommunications equipment. So we've therefore recommended denial of this project as the proposed screening material does not comply with guidelines for street facade materials. And just for reference is the image provided by the applicant of the the FRP material, which would have a faux brick texture to sort of match the adjacent masonry.
Great, thank you, Evan. Do any commissioners have questions for staff?
Would ask, just if you would, maybe for my benefit, if brick does not work and FRP is obviously not an approved material, can you refresh my memory on what thin materials are approved, generally speaking?
Well, I
Like
guess
like a metal panel or
yeah,
stucco or something like that. What materials would generally be approved?
yeah. So we had suggested perhaps that they could go for a metal panel, something that would be distinct and not a faux masonry, but we were told that that would also interfere with the telecom equipment. And I think the same would be true of, you know, a true stucco or any sort of stucco that would meet our requirements. I mean, I'm inclined to say that the sort of conditions of the site they've chosen on this building are really what are at issue here, in that they've chosen an appurtenance that's in line with the facade. And so, you know, those facade material requirements are much more restrictive than maybe what could be allowed for screening that would be set back from the street facade with minimized visibility.
Evan, I had a question for you. In the applicant's in the application, I'm sorry, where the applicant talks about height and they talk about the view plane. They suggest that if the equipment were to be moved and take up a parking space, that it would be more noticeable. So is the parapet just so low that the view plane would not hide the equipment if it was somewhere else on the roof? Is that something you guys worked on?
We didn't really discuss in detail moving the the equipment to, or at least I didn't discuss with the applicants, moving to the parking level. So I haven't really given that much thought. I think I would say there's nowhere on the, small roof of this appurtenance to meet that setback requirement and be below the view plane. But I hadn't really explored that option or discussed it with the applicants. So I'm not sure I can
Okay, thank you.
really answer. Yeah.
Any other questions for Evan? Yeah, Jim.
Jim, you're still muted.
Is there any material other than a screen type of approach which would meet the requirements and still be usable for the applicant?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay,
In short.
thank you.
Do you have a question, Andy?
Evan, I know that they supplied photographs of the proposed FRP material. Have they provided any kind of spec information or physical samples to LDDRC to take a look at?
No, I haven't received any physical samples.
Okay.
And I had one. to-
Related question, Jane, is, Madam Chair, is the FRP material such that it would age, and as it ages, change color at the same rate as the true brick?
I'm not positive. I mean, I suspect that the true brick wouldn't really age or discolor, other than a very, very slight weathering. The FRP is a plastic material, so I'm inclined to say that it would, which is, I think, why the guideline for facade materials is written as it is written. But again, I think maybe in some cases it could be appropriate for screening when it's set back, but because it's in line with the facade, any changes like you're suggesting would be highly visible and apparent.
Thank you.
So Evan, I had one question too that maybe for the applicant, or maybe for you. So I'll start here. When you, in the report where it mentions that these other materials would interfere with the communications equipment, is that a transmission interference, or is that a physical interference? Like the material is physically too thick, or is it just the ability of the equipment to function?
I think that it's the thick solid materials like a true masonry or metal interfere with the waves. So I think it would basically be preventing the antennas to really service the area that they're intending. Really, the reason they chose this site, my understanding, is they would like to provide service to 18th Street. And if they're installing the masonry, the antenna just wouldn't be able to reach 18th Street and provide the service they're looking for. But the applicants may be able to provide more clarity on that, since I don't, it's all kind of magic to me, honestly.
Thank you. Any other questions for Evan?
One more, and I'm sorry, if I could find it myself, I wouldn't ask the question, but do the guidelines require that the equipment is screened?
I don't believe so. I'd have to check again, or I don't know if maybe Brittany is more versed in the LODO guidelines than I am, but I don't believe so. But again, it seemed appropriate. That was sort of the compromise that we were working towards in this case, because the equipment would not meet the setback requirements of 15 feet from the street facade. So that was, I think, sort of something that the applicant was offering up to try to meet the spirit of the guidelines.
And there is, I'm just looked at your staff report, Evan, 8.2.3 screening says a requirement, all equipment, roof and wall mounted shall be grouped and screened top and sides within a single enclosure.
There we go. It is required.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, unless, looks like there are no more questions for Evan. So I'd like to invite the applicant to unmute themselves and
Well, here's the rub. So the applicants that Evan said are coming aren't on the list. So if anyone who is attending as a member of the public is actually the applicant, could you press the raise hand function and we'll switch you over so you can give a presentation. I'm not seeing anyone do that, which is concerning. Evan, do you see the names on the participants list?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not seeing the people I've communicated with.
Okay.
I did send an email this morning to try and confirm that someone was coming. I didn't get a response, so it is possible that I wasn't quite clear enough in the suggestion to attend the meeting, or they misunderstood.
All right. Well, we do, yeah, Jim?
Would it be appropriate to offer a motion to table this discussion until and unless the applicant shows? Be it tomorrow or the next meeting or the meeting after that, because that's a staff decision, which is fine with me too.
Well, I think, Nate, if we could get you to chime in at all, you could continue it to a future meeting, which would be, just pulling down my calendar, March 3rd. We have had meetings in which the commission, we've told the applicant they need to be there and they have not showed up. And you all have made, or the LPC has made a determination without their presentation.
Thank you.
Nate, are both options viable?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Nate Lucero, Assistant City Attorney. That's correct. The commission could either, make a decision on this design review project without hearing from the applicant, or, postpone the matter to a date certain. But then you're stuck in the same position you are now if the applicant chooses not to show up next time as well.
But I also think that if you all have a lot of questions, which it sounds like you do, and they're questions that the applicant would be best answering, potentially this would be a good one to continue to the next meeting. And if the applicant doesn't show up, then the applicant doesn't show up that time either.
I guess for what it's worth, I feel like if they aren't here, then the application has to stand on its own. Then they haven't sent in and said, gosh, sorry, we've got an issue, could we postpone? They've submitted an application and it's been on the agenda, and it's not as though they sent us a note and said, we've got a problem today, or somebody's sick. Anyway, just my thought.
Maybe it's not that different either way. I mean, they have to come back and talk to us again. I don't know if there's like a timing difference between a denial or a just let's postpone them. I do think this is a weird problem, though. I'm sure that they would be happy to use brick because it's not that much brick if they could technically do it.
Before you guys go into deliberation, though, Jane hasn't called for public comment, just in case you want to go that route. Sorry to interrupt, Mike.
Okay.
yeah, let's ask for public comment and then we can maybe discuss how we want to move forward in case any public comment would influence that. So is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this application?
You can use the hand raise button at the bottom of your screen if you would like to comment. And no one is raising their hand, so no public comment.
Okay. Yes, then it is appropriate to go into deliberation and Mike, please.
Well, I guess I would like to see if there's another solution here, if there's another material that works. Having something that looks different perched on top of this, I don't think is necessarily great either. it would call attention to it, I suppose it could be painted brick color. Before Jen said it had to be screened, I was just wondering if it would be better off not screened, if it would be less massive and more invisible in the sky, or if it could be mounted on the facade of the building and painted to look like brick, or if there's some other alternative. I think it was Jim who said, is this going to fade or change color differently? And I have to think it would. And I think that's a really good question, actually. So I don't know, like I said, I'm sure they would do brick if it didn't mess up the technology, because it's just not that much square footage of material either way. It just seems like a tricky one here.
And Evan, did you have a comment or clarification?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add a little bit of clarification on the material, and maybe to provide some additional information from conversations I had with the applicant. Wanted to be clear that the proposed material would not appear as it appears in the image exactly. It would be painted to exactly, or as close as possible, to match the appearance of the existing masonry. I also will say that when we brought up alternative materials, the applicant was quite adamant that this was the only real option that they could use. It could certainly be arranged in a different way that wouldn't match the brick, but could look distinct. As Mike suggested, though, that may not be preferable. And then I wanted to clarify that to those 2 points, mounting on the facade is discouraged in the guidelines and was the original proposal that the applicant came forward with, which was then where we worked towards this. Obviously, the commission can determine that might be more appropriate. And then as well, not screening it would be in conflict with the guidelines, but again, you'd have the ability to go that route. I will say as well that the applicant indicated that if this were not approved, they would likely look to other locations. So they may be looking to move this facility to a different building, or expanding on an existing telecom facility, which might just be reviewed by staff. So I hope that's helpful. Sorry to jump in on your discussion.
So looks like we've got a few questions. So I'll just start with who's on my screen first, and that's Heather.
Thanks, Jane. I don't know if it's really a question or more just kind of commentary, because I have recent experience coordinating with Verizon on a 5G antenna on a project that is not in the Lodo district, but falls under urban design review along 16th Street. And had a lot of the same kind of challenges to work out that Evan has kind of presented here. And so this is tricky for me to try to figure out the right way to approach it. Because the feedback that I got from that group was very similar to what Evan has been saying, that the technology, like the waves can't go out through solid materials. It has to be something that is like this FRP that it can transmit through. On that particular project, I mean, we talked about perforated metal screening, like all kinds of things, doing the same thing of mounting it on a facade that was set back from the front parapet so it wouldn't be visible, and that wouldn't work. I mean, there were just a lot of very technical things that's above my pay grade to figure out how these things kind of transmit and go out, which makes it a little challenging to try to figure out the right approach. I do think that it's worth kind of considering a little bit. I know that Evan has referred to this as an existing, structure on top of the roof. I think that from what I am understanding from the applicant and just knowledge of this parking structures, that's a stair tower. It's not necessarily, it doesn't house other things other than necessary egress of the building. So that's likely why it is located where it's at and why it's not set back from the roof. And so I think that gives it a little bit more flexibility and review. I also think it's important to remember that this is non-contributing. And I think that if we were to consider any kind of deviations from the guidelines. I think that the testimony should be very clear that we're only considering that in this instance because it's a non-contributing structure. And if this was contributing, it would be a lot more difficult to approve something like that. And then just personal opinion, my previous experience had an existing cell tower kind of tack on to the building that was painted to look like the facade, and it from an untrained eye you probably wouldn't notice it, but as soon as you realized what that was, you could tell that it was not the real material and it was painted. And so my recommendation is that if we feel like there's enough validity to approve the FRP here, I would suggest seeing what we could do to kind of just set it back from the face of the brick, even if it's just a little bit, as opposed to trying to stack it in the same plane. And I would recommend doing it in just a solid color that is the brick color, or just a solid color that is complementary, as opposed to trying to paint it to look like brick. Because I think if you try to paint it to look like brick, it's going to stand out that it's not really brick. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Heather. How about Andy?
So Heather and Fred have pretty much hit on the comments that I made when I was going through this. And I agree with Heather in that if these planes are aligned, so it looks like it's brick, I think it's going to look fine for about a year, and then it's going to weather. And then that's my big concern, is that when it first goes up, it'll probably be fine. But because of Denver's climate, I'm really concerned that after a couple of seasons, this FRP is going to look really, really bad, and it's going to stand out. And if there was another way of articulating how those planes came together, I don't think the weathering would be as bad, but it all boils down to what is the material, how well does it hold paint, and do they have any other kind of locations where this has been used that we could see how it's weathering. And then again, it goes down to if it is approved by the LDDRC, then it needs to be pretty ironclad in these the record that this is a one-time only location, and it's just because of this position. And even then, I'm a little concerned just because of precedence and how this could be interpreted in other places. I'm just thinking back to a similar project that we looked at in Ballpark when I was on LPC, and we kind of tried to get ourselves tied into pretzels to make it work for the client. But at the end of the day, the guidelines are what they are, and there was no reason we had to approve it. And so it was slightly different in that that was a contributing structure and it was mounted to the face of the building. And we just said, no, it wasn't going to work. This is a non-contributing building in a screened area, so it's a little different. And it's one of the reasons I really wish that the applicant would have been here, because we could have asked a bunch of questions. But I think Fred kind of made a good point in that if we deny it at this time, it doesn't preclude them from coming back to this. They can't come back with the same application, but they could make additions to it that we could have the conversation. So it is kind of a weird situation. I'm kind of in agreement with Fred that they're not here to talk about it. Per the information we have and per the discussions we have, it's kind of at a stage of denial. They're not here to defend it. So it's one of those things, it's like, I think we can deny it and move on, and they can come back with another proposal or another location.
Thanks, Andy. Fred, did you have comments?
Yeah. Yeah, I did want to comment, make a few comments. Thank you. I think that the FRP material is problematic. I think the material itself, I have concerns about its longevity, as Andy does, and how it will look after a short period of time. I'm also concerned about any attempts to create faux masonry like that. And you know, there's a little bit of a precedent that's set there, but there's also, it seems to me to go against some of the bedrock principles of historic preservation, et cetera. And though this is not a contributing building, I'm not sure that that is something that we should bend to. It does seem clear to me that there's likely to be a need for some kind of flexibility if we are to eventually approve something on this building, but I don't feel like they've presented the answer. I noted earlier, and I asked it earlier about from page 8 of the application, where they talk about the height and wanted to avoid taking a parking space within the parking garage. It does seem to me that that might be something we're studying, and that a better economic outcome for the applicant or for their landlord is not necessarily a reason for us to ignore the guidelines. So that to me is a path that if the applicant were to come back to us, that I would like to understand what that would mean if they went in, if they took it 15 feet away and took it to an interior parking space and took up a parking space. Would that be visible from the street? Given the view planes, et cetera, would that be potentially an answer where we could see something like that without screening, for example? So I feel like there's a little bit of a design challenge here for the applicant that they haven't really met. And I also don't think, while we can give feedback, it's not our job to redesign it for them. So would love to see them come back with some better answers about what might work. But again, I think to me, the FRP is really a non-starter. Thanks.
Fred, I would agree with your statement that I don't know that the applicant has necessarily demonstrated that this is the best and only solution. They haven't really demonstrated any other options or any other things to look at. I would challenge and say, rather than putting it on the top, could they consider putting it on, the face of the stair tower that is not facing Market or 18th Street, one of the two sides that would be less visible, or exactly what you said, could it be located inward a little bit and take up space on a parking stall, or even, maybe it doesn't need to be a full stall, maybe it's just an area that's striped in a no parking zone. So I would agree that I don't feel necessarily that the application as it stands adequately documents all of the other options and kind of proves that this is the only way that it's going to work. I do know that it's challenging, and it may be something that just broadly the city and the landmark staff need to address that in some updates of how we accommodate kind of telecom and utility things moving forward. But yeah, I agree that I don't know that as the application stands currently, that there's enough in it to justify approving it as it is.
All right. Any other comments from commissioners or thoughts?
I'd be happy to make a motion. Oh wait, John's got it, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, just quickly, I was going to say, I do agree. I think that looking at alternate locations and presenting those would be great for us to be able to assess. I do note that there is some FRP grading product solutions that are sort of have a bit more dimensional, have a bit more material quality, but I completely agree on this idea of trying to match brick. It doesn't make sense and will obviously be different. So perhaps some of those grading solutions could be something that could be suggested to as another material option in FRP that has a bit more dimensional character to it, quality to it, for the applicant if they come back with some additional options for us to review.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too, that the guideline 8.2.3 that specifically addresses screening does focus more on color. And I think based on what others have said, if this project were to go forward in this location, I would, just as input for the applicant, I would rather see something that has a factory finish and a color that matches the building that has longevity, as opposed to a painted finish that would require more maintenance. But I also agree with others that I think we don't have an understanding of all of the options for other locations and an understanding that all other avenues have been investigated. So those are my thoughts, but it sounded like we were getting close to a motion.
Yeah, I'm happy to make a motion. I
Sure.
move to deny application 2022 COA 050 for the construction of a new telecommunications facility at 1331 17th Street per design guidelines 6.2.1, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Fred. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Heather. Any comments or amendments?
I guess I just have a question for my own benefit.
Yeah.
Assuming that this motion passes, how quickly can an applicant be back on our calendar?
They could potentially come back next month. There's the filing deadline for that is, hold on a second, 1, 2, 3, is next, today's the 3rd, right? Yeah, so it's Tuesday.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments before we vote? Okay, let's go through our roll call and start with Mike.
I'm a yes on the motion.
Andy,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Heather,
Aye.
and Jane, aye. So the motion passes and the application is denied. Okay. So that concludes the design review agenda. So next we can move to business or discussion items, and it looks like we have a discussion item from Jim.
And Jim, you have your hand up? Did you?
Yeah, just a quick item that is connected with the last one, but I didn't want to raise it during that discussion. We had a similar problem with Union Station with that they had here, and the issue was the big sign, which is a part of Union Station. It says Union Station travel by train. And I was asked by the RTD whether they should go to the original color. And we looked at the original color, which is a bright orange, and decided that the weathered orange in that case was something that everyone was used to and looked a lot better. So we actually, that's not the original color that's up there now, but that is, and that's a little bit different than what we're talking here, but it does show how this climate can really weather things.
Indeed, quite true. All right, well, I know it's the moment you guys have been waiting for. What did we do last year? Landmark preservation. I know, it's super exciting. So I'll try to go through it quickly. But so we had a huge year last year, as we do pretty much every year. We ended 2021 with 58 historic districts. So that's 2 more than we had last year at this time last year. So we have La Alma Lincoln Park Historic Cultural District in the La Alma Lincoln Park neighborhood. It was designated in the autumn, and in the winter, the Steel Street Extension Historic District was designated, and that is the 600 and 700 blocks, the east side of the 600 and 700 blocks of Steel Street were created a new historic district that is an extension of the East 7th Avenue Historic District. So the west side of those 2 blocks was designated part of East 7th Avenue. The east side is now also designated as a historic district. So We also added 300, or we have 353 individual landmarks. We did not add all of them last year, thank goodness. But we added 3. So 1272 Columbine in Congress Park, 6400 East Montview in Park Hill, and Pancratia Hall down at the Loretto Heights campus were all added as individual landmarks. In terms of projects we worked on last year, some of them were completed and some of them are still ongoing this year. So the completed projects include the Loretto Heights Small Area Plan implementation, the zoning package for that. We worked on the plan and also on the zoning package that was adopted by City Council. And so that was done in May of last year. Golden Triangle regulatory package was also something we worked on for a few years, and that was adopted by City Council last year. And then we created some customized design guidelines for the La Alma Lincoln Park Historic Cultural District to recognize the unique characteristics of that district. And so those were adopted by the Landmark Preservation Commission last year after designation of the district. Things that we worked on last year and are still in progress are the Latino Chicano Historic Context. So that is a examination with the Chicano and Latino communities on the historic development patterns and history of the communities in Denver up to 1990. And we are going to be having a community meeting and mini documentary screening from I Am Denver, the citywide storytelling program. And that is going to be on February 24th of this year at this, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, it's the C Film Center over by East High School on East Colfax. And Fred, you're laughing. I'm saying it wrong. What am I, how am I saying it? C, thank you.
C Center.
That's what I thought, but I always keep mixing it up because people are like, no, are you sure? So thank you. Okay. We kicked off the landmark design guideline update last year, last fall. We're going to be doing that in 4 phases to help roll this out and make it a little bit of a easier update, hopefully, so it's not just one giant comprehensive update. We are in partnership with Historic Denver on the Discover Denver Citywide Architectural and Historical Survey. And last year and this year, we're working on phases 4 and 5 of Discover Denver. And then last year and this year, we have worked on the West Area Plan and the near Northwest and near Southeast area plans, which are part of the Neighborhood Planning Initiative. So we're actively involved with those. In terms of design review, so we have 3 levels of review. We have quick reviews, which are typically things like re-roofing and simple mechanical, simple electrical work. On the exterior of a building, those we usually do within 1 business day or 2. We also have administrative reviews, which are things that we can approve administratively as staff, but don't go to the commission and don't necessarily qualify as quick reviews because of their complexity. And then we have commission reviews, and the number of commission reviews here, 286, is a little bit higher than what the LPC and LDDRC actually reviewed, but that is because some of those applications are still ongoing or are still or were withdrawn or changed or to some extent modified. So we had a total of 1,855 total applications last year for design review. Here's a chart of the last 6 years. You can see the areas in blue are quick reviews, and you can see that number has gone down pretty substantially so that it's quite low. And then the number of administrative reviews, which is green, has gone up quite a bit at the same time. And city council members were like, well, that must be because you're making things harder for applicants. And actually, that's not the case. The analysis shows that it's because in the previous years, we had a lot of hailstorms. It's largely re-roofing reviews. So in these 3 years, we had substantial hailstorms in our historic districts. And in the last 3 years, we did not. And so if we have hailstorms this year, that number is going to skyrocket again. It's really largely about re-roofing. In terms of our administrative and commission level reviews, this is really hard to see. There's a lot of categories, but you can really see that the spikes are for the log and zone reviews. Those are for building permit applications, and then also for revisions. So those are things that come in after we've issued a certificate of appropriateness, and people either make changes in the field or they make changes during permitting or during inspections. Those changes are caught, things like that. So I'm going to take those out and we're going to look a little bit more closely at these because it's a little easier to see since those are the real tall spikes. This gives you a better sense of the general range of things. So the largest types of projects we have are things like alterations, and that's a very general term. Oops, I went too far, but alterations are a big one for us. Site work that doesn't include fences are a big one. Window and door replacement are a big one. So those are the peaks, but the big ones that came up this year, or this past year, I should say, are all things associated with people being at home. They all want to make changes to their homes. And so we're seeing a lot of additions and accessory dwelling units. And we did see a lot of infill construction, and that is associated with the DHA site in Curtis Park. They split that into 13 developable lots. And so we had a whole bunch of infill in Curtis Park last year. And then site work, solar, we had a lot of solar this year, which was really exciting to see. I always do an analysis of what the commissions do and what our recommendations are and how closely we have interpreted the guidelines compared to the commission. So the Landmark Preservation Commission had a ton of reviews. They had 217 reviews. They had 28 meetings, which is 4 more than their usual because we had so many things going on. Some of them were things where we had to have like an emergency meeting to a special meeting is technically called because of designations that owner post designations or things like that had to be reviewed in a certain time period. So largely we were fairly close with reading what we thought the commission was going to say based on our design guidelines. The commission did approve things with conditions or denied them a little bit more often than we recommended, but it was pretty close, which was great. You all reviewed 20 things, 20 projects. It was fairly minimal last year, and you had 9 meetings. And then John joined the commission, which is very exciting. So, but we gauged what you guys were going to say fairly closely, as you can see. We were pretty much on par with each other, which is you guys don't always have to review things in the same way, but it helps us to understand if we are reading the commission correctly and if we are giving the right advice to applicants. So demolition and certificate of demolition eligibility reviews is another big part of our work. So we had 10 of them in historic districts. That is largely things like rooftop demolition for a pop top, or sometimes we'll have like a garage demolition that we're not sure if the commission is going to consider contributing or not, that kind of thing. It's usually not demolition of a primary structure that's considered historic. It might be a non-contributing building. We have a certificate of demolition eligibility program where someone can, if they're doing their due diligence, can find out whether landmark staff would consider the property to have potential to be a landmark or not. And we also just have regular demolition applications. So 777 of them. Oh my gosh, my computer is going to restart in 5 minutes. Awesome. Let's go through this fast. Then you can see this. So if we find a property has potential to be a landmark, we post that within 10 business days. And we did not post 745 applications. So we had a huge number of applications last year compared to the last 7 years. We posted only 17 of that. That's 2.2% of the applications that came in. And you can actually see here that we updated our ordinance at the end of 2019 and made it much more challenging, as you can see, to make it an individual landmark property. And so that's a reflection in the numbers of properties that we can post each year. We have tax credits that the LPC certifies and last year the LPC certified over $75,000 in tax credits. And that is a total of $366,000 of work that was done on those projects, which is fantastic. that there's a lot of work going on our historic properties. We receive grants for some of the work that we do because we do have a limited budget. So for the Latino Chicano historic context, we received grants from History Colorado State Historical Fund, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, as well as council members Sandoval and Torres, and then our own money from Community Planning and Development for this. And then our Discover Denver partnership is largely funded by the State Historical Fund. And then also the CPD Landmark Fund goes into that money. Or goes into that. Last year, we launched a webinar series. It's every Thursday, or sorry, one Thursday a month at noon. And we covered a wide range of topics, and all of those were recorded and put on our website so that people can review those afterwards, which is exciting. And we're going to continue doing that this year. We gave a whole bunch of presentations, largely about designations or about plans we're working on and things like that. I'm not going to go into these because my computer is going to restart. We also gave presentations at, I think it was 15 presentations at conferences and symposia and university lectures throughout the year to try to further the role of preservation in our state and country and city. We had an associate city planner that was promoted to senior city planner, and that's Becca Deershaw, and we're recruiting for the new associate city planner this year. It's currently posted. If you know anyone interested, please send them our way. We had a changeover in our inspector. So Andy Murtha took over for Delfino Rodriguez when he left, but then she was poached by forestry. And so she left, and we ended up hiring Matt Huta, who just started a couple of weeks ago, and he's been great so far. So we'll have him for our 2022 update. Taylor Cortez is a Master's of Architecture student at CU Denver, and she was hired as landmark intern, and she's going to continue through the end of this semester helping us out. She's been fantastic as well. And then the last slide before it restarts, we are continuing the webinar series. We're going to complete the Latino Chicano historic context and work on implementation of that. And then we've applied for grants for the next context. And if we get them, hopefully we will get them, we will announce what we're going to work on there. We're going to do phases 1 and 2 of the design guideline update for the general landmark design guidelines. We have some designations that applicants are working with us on, and so those will go through the LPC. The West Area Plan will be completed, and then the near Northwest and near Southeast will continue on. We are doing some preliminary planning for a new preservation plan for the city, and studying existing designations for inclusivity to make sure that we actually recognize the properties that are for what they should be designated for, that are already designated. For example, like West High School is not designated for its importance for the Chicano movement and the blowout, but it should be, and it's because when it was designated, it was too recent of a past for that to be considered historic. So, and then finally, the Discover Denver project will go into phases, complete phase 4 and go into phase 5. So that's it, I think. Happy to answer questions, but wanted to tell you guys all about the fun stuff we're doing.
I'll just say it's not a question. I just want to make the comment that I really don't know how you all get it all done and do such a great job in supporting us and LPC, and the numbers are staggering, and it's just impressive to hear about all of this. So I hope staff knows how appreciated they are, and it's just an impressive list.
Thank you.
And I would add, I mean, I'm sitting down with Jill on Monday to talk about adaptive reuse and the issues that one encounters. And the one thing I have to say there is that the most consistently positive experience across all of CPD and all of the other entities that get involved in that is Landmark. And I feel like you guys have really got an ethos about how do we get to solutions that means that, I know that there's work that one has to do with Landmark with some of these projects, but I don't face them with the same kind of dread that I do with other departments and other inside and outside of CPD. So,
well, thank you very much. And I know that all of the other departments are working on trying to reduce dread. It's like going to the DMV. I mean, what can you do is, at some point, permitting is permitting and inspection is inspection, but we all approach it with a very positive attitude, or we try to. So thank you for your kind comments. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the update.
Yeah, so then I think unless there's any other comments or questions, we can officially adjourn.
Better adjourn before Jen's computer bursts.
I just closed it, so.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice to see everyone.
Take care.